Welcome back to part 2 of this teacher career transition story. So if you haven't listened to part 1, head back to our channel and check that out before listening in because we're kicking off right where we left off. If you've already listened to part 1, then let's dive in. I'm Lisa Harding, ex-EdTech CEO turned certified teacher career coach. It wasn't all that long ago that I was recruiting, interviewing, and hiring teachers for roles in corporate America. Teachers that ended up being some of my all-time best employees. Fast forward through my own career transition, where I left my role as CEO to become a stay-at-home mom, I now work with and empower teachers to transform their lives by turning their once distant career dreams into realities. In this podcast, I give you simple, actionable, step-by-step strategies to help you do the same. If you're a burnt-out teacher or simply need a change and you're looking to create a life you love, you're in the right place, friend. Let's get started.
I love that it's more have that open and honest conversation, because this is different than being like, hey, I'm feeling burnt out and I want to quit teaching. Like, help me. That's a different conversation where this is like, hey, we don't even have to, maybe you're like, I can't do classroom teaching anymore. You don't even have to bridge that topic. You can just be like, hey, I'm really interested in how I can get a leadership position here. So, but right now I'm feeling a little stressed and burnt out. So I'm wondering, what can I do to make myself more marketable for this while still making sure that I feel like I can get everything done that I need to get done. So I love that. And especially if you have that relationship with your administration already, I'm sure it's much easier to do that. But I can only imagine, again, this is me talking from my own opinions, but we know what the state of affair looks like in education. So if teachers are expressing that they have an interest in staying, I can only imagine that's going to work in their favor.
Exactly.
Because there's plenty of people like me who are like, deuces, I'm out.
And nobody blames you. No.
Yeah, we all get it, right? And I honestly, in hearing the instructional coach role, I'm like, I feel very fulfilled in what I do now, but I had a really hard time with the mental leap of choosing to leave a school, because that's just, I had so much passion in what I did and working with kids and the act of teaching, not the job of teaching, but the act of teaching. And so it was hard for me to want to make that leap. So I think if I had realized this sooner, I would have been better about being able to put myself on a path for instructional coach. But for me, I feel like I got to a point where I was like, woo, I'm gonna have to spend a lot more years doing some of this before I get there. And I just hit a burnout point that I couldn't do it anymore.
And I say that to teachers and anybody, you know what you need.
Yeah.
And if this is not what you want. And it's funny because, I have my days too, where I'm like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
This is, and then it just takes one or two students just to, crack a joke or something, or a teacher's like, oh my gosh, thank God you're here. Just those little things where you're like, okay, I am helping, I'm making a change, and that's important.
And I love that you still get to interact with students in that way, because I know for teachers, that's why they get into teaching, is for the interactions with students. So it's nice that now you're in a role where you still get to love them, you still get to support them, you still get to be like a confidant for them and be that person. You're just not the full-time one. Right. And that to me feels very.
And I'm not after this student. Did you do the paper? Yeah. Did you turn it in? Did you submit it? I'm like, hey, take your hat off. You know what I mean? It's a lot easier. But totally. It's just so nice because I think I said before, like there'll be a student who, you see him coming in, you're like, oh, but oh my God, I love that kid. They're like, what?
Yeah.
Because my relationship's so different.
Totally.
Because I'm not teaching them.
Small doses too helps, I'm sure, with some of those
kids.
Big
time. Yeah.
When you're not like their mom and the mom or dad and during the day, like it is very much having that. Like I said, my instructional coach too, those are some of my kids' favorite people of like, I'm done with her. Where's the stuff?
Yeah. And teaching it's exhausting. You're on constantly.
Yeah.
I can hide in my office. If I want to cry under a desk, I can do that. No one's going to really care. But you know what I mean? Yeah. Like you're constantly on. And here, I'm not feeling that great. I can still, do my job and maybe I won't smile as much, but you're not constantly on. Teaching is the best acting job ever because, you're constantly being watched and you got to put that smile on your face, even though you didn't have your coffee, so.
That's that, I didn't even think of that part too, where it's, you at least have, like you said, I can use the bathroom when I want, but it's the reprieve of not being in teacher mode all the time of like, even, and like you said, some days maybe you don't get as much of that, but the fact that you even have days where it's like, I can just have my time, get my work done.
Right.
Like I thought about that all the time as a teacher. Like I just need a day to sit down and get a bunch of things done. But you're never given that because you're always in that performance mode.
Right.
So it truly feels like
and I didn't get to watch it. I can watch it tomorrow. I can put out time. Okay, I'm not available from 10 to 11. Teachers can't do that. They got to bring that stuff home. So it's really, it is, you have a lot more time, but yet sometimes you don't. Like during testing time, which is almost all the time, I'm the assistant to the testing coordinator.
Yeah.
So running around, there's days that I think one day 2 weeks ago, I walked 7 miles at school. 7 miles. So there's going to be those days, but again, so different. It's so different. I'm coming home knowing I'm not going to have an email from 10 parents or all that happens.
Yeah, it does. It's real, unfortunately. But now I do have one question because a thought came into my brain that I was like, I also know I get this question often for non-school positions, but summer breaks, you still get them. Do they look the same as when you were a teacher?
They look a lot different because teachers, they don't stop in the summer.
No.
They are, there's a new textbook. They got to learn a new textbook. They have to go to trainings. They don't have to go to trainings now, and they do get paid, but it's very little money. It's like $25 an hour, but at least it's something. My summers are, I usually get 10 days that I work over the summer. And the principal will usually be like, why don't you come in this day? Or, we'll do a lot of things for the next year starting already. Where I think as a teacher, I was constantly trying to learn a new program.
Yeah.
Where with my position, teachers would be like, oh, do you know how to do blah, blah, blah? I'm like, not yet. I'll learn. And I have more time to learn that. But in the summers, you're also meeting with the teachers you're working with. You're trying to figure out how you're going to change this. That didn't work last year. I'm going to change this lesson. I felt like I was constantly on my head, in my brain.
Yeah.
Where now I'm like, okay, I don't have to worry about setting up a classroom. I've been in the same office for 7 years. I don't have to worry about what's my syllabus going to look like. All those things. Tomorrow's open house. My position is just helping parents follow their kids' schedule, smile. I don't have to be in front of parents explaining my curriculum and then having parents trying to do a parent-teacher conference then and those kind of things. And you're trying not to be rude. And so my summers were more stressful as a teacher because you're constantly thinking, what can I do better next year? Yeah. And then like the behaviors and everything, getting every child engaged is so difficult with this day and age because we're all on devices all the time. Yeah. And now our whole school is digital. Yeah. So students have laptops with them all the time. So during the summer, you're trying to think of ways to engage them. Those worries are over.
Yeah. So even though you still have a summer break, it sounds like it's a little bit less, but it feels like, and this is how I feel, I don't get a summer break anymore, obviously.
I know.
But I didn't feel like I needed that type of break. Like I was hanging on by a thread by the last day of school. And I genuinely needed summer break to reset. But like you said, my brain was still turned on with school all of the time, where it feels like, yes, you still get time off. Yes, it's a little bit less, but you're not feeling that same type of stress. And like you almost, yes, you need a summer break. We all still need
it. Oh, yeah.
But take that away. It's not that desperate, like, if I don't get this, like I'm literally going to fall apart.
And I see teachers already getting burned out and it's September.
Which is unfortunately.
And it's heartbreaking. Yeah. And I'm not even exaggerating. 3 teachers today were like, I need Thanksgiving break. I'm like, honey, you got a long time coming.
Today's episode is sponsored by the Teacher Career Transition Academy. Are you eager to explore new possibilities but find yourself unsure of where to start? Look no further than our Teacher Career Directory. Available for free, this comprehensive resource features over 200 careers tailored for transitioning teachers. Dive into detailed insights, including average U.S. salary ranges, occupational outlooks, and even a personalized skills and interests inventory. Download now at teachercareertransitionacademy.com/directory. I'll also drop the link in the show notes of this episode. So don't miss out and claim your free directory today at teachercareertransitionacademy.com/directory.
I know. It's so that's how I knew it was my time to leave. It's when I felt the end of year stress and it was the beginning of the year. Cause like you're always gonna feel that stress at some point. I knew that.
Right.
But when it was starting and it was 2 weeks into the school year and I was already that burnt out, that's when I was like, I can't keep maintaining this
No,
every
you
single
can't.
year. So I can get to the end of this year, but that's the most I got. And I didn't even have a plan when I left. I was like, I just know it can't be this.
You knew it. Yeah, you knew it was time.
So,
and like I said, you got to listen to yourself.
you do. Absolutely. Like you, and I, again, for anyone who's listening, like that mental leap is really hard. I know I didn't put up like the first slide here, all about mindsets, because this one is a little bit less of that mindset shift since you're staying in schools, but it is a shift to have to overcome. And even if you're feeling guilty about like, I'm not going to be that person's classroom teacher. Like, I hope that hearing Terri's story, at least in the interaction she still has with kids, helps if you had any of that anxiety. So I know I glossed over it today just because it's typically not as much of a thing. But that is still the case. It's something that you still have to think through and listen to yourself. But it's not easy when you're hearing that call, because this is something that a lot of us have worked so hard for. And it was our dream or our passion. It's something we knew we wanted to do, but it's okay. So I would like to name that if you're sitting there now, even being like, hey, maybe instructional coach isn't for me, that's okay. And I promise you will figure it out if you put time into it. But it does take time, unfortunately.
Right. And I think a lot of people feel like if they're leaving teaching, well, they failed.
Yeah. Right.
Not the case at
Absolutely
all.
not.
No, because so many people change their careers.
Totally.
You got to do what makes you feel good, makes you happy.
Yeah.
And if teaching's not it, then you go to a different path like we're talking about, or
whatever it is. And I think that is so important. Like in the corporate world, it's totally normal that people are just like bounce around, new career, new job, this, that. Like no one blinks twice and is like, oh, they're no longer doing marketing. Like no one says that. So no, if you feel that way, please don't. Like, again, this is your life and you need to make sure that you are feeling fulfilled and happy. And if that means maybe this worked at the time, and we all know it's changing, we all know it's getting harder. And as you even said, like you see an uptick of behaviors and you're not in the classroom with them every day. So like, it's okay. So if you're feeling that way, like just know.
Right.
Beautiful. I just want to give a quick call too. If you guys do have questions, I'm about to be on my like last slide here. So I want to make sure if you do have questions, drop them in the chat so I can integrate them in. So Terri, I know normally, again, this is a different type of webinar, which I love because you're still in the school. So when I think about like interviews and negotiations, one, we know negotiations are not really a thing in school because we're on step systems, but when it comes to an interview, I'm more thinking about kind of the things we've talked about. How do we build up to a point where I can be that person? Can you just give kind of a summary of like, what skills are people really looking for within a coach that people can start thinking about? Like, here's how I can start to bring that part of me out a little bit more.
Okay. Strong emphasis on relationships. Definitely, because you are going to be that go-to person that teachers are going to go to for advice. And even if you don't know it, you'll get it. Yeah. Look confident. Okay. Know and understand like about data. Data is our big word. Be able to talk about data and how you use the data to create your lesson plans and things like that. They really want you to know that even though we don't want to look at our numbers all the time, that you have a good idea about data and how it can bring up your school grade. But talk about relationships and talk about maybe some scenarios that you have worked out with parents and things so that admin knows that you have dealt with conflict, and especially with adults, because you're going to have sometimes you're going to have some conversations you don't want to have with teachers as well.
Yeah, totally.
Because you're a coach and you got to be honest, but you got to be able to know how to work that. But yeah, I think if you go in, you talk about how relationships in the classroom are very strong too, plus the relationships outside the classroom, talking about that you understand data and things like that. That's going to be help you be a good candidate to be an instructional coach. And also if you have done some of the things that I talked about, like the facilitated coaching or started on it, you know about it, that's a big help.
Okay. Yeah, I'm glad that you kind of brought those pieces up too. I didn't really consider that part of
Because
one.
they will look at like, okay, have you done the facilitated? And I'm thinking, I'm just talking Orange County.
Yeah,
Have you done the different series to become an instructional coach? You can become an instructional coach before taking those. They would just have
yeah,
you start them. But just showing that, you're ready to go into a leadership position, you're confident, that's going to help a lot.
yeah. And I'm glad you brought up the tough conversations part, because I know that was one of my least favorite things in teaching, was having tough conversations with parents, because it
Mhm.
was the adult. Like I can have a
Mhm.
tough convo with a kid all day long because I taught third grade. They
Oh
were
yeah,
like,
that's easy. Yeah.
but my least favorite thing was having to call home and be like, this happened today, because I
Mhm.
knew it was tougher with me for adults. So that is actually important to think about, that you are going to be working with adults. So if you're like, I do not enjoy those type of
Right.
interactions that are tough with adults, like you said, you're going to have those. And as you know, not every teacher that even comes to your school is going to work out or is going to be like positive and lovely. They're going to be like parents sometimes, or they're difficult to work with, or they're not happy. Like you
Mhm.
are going to have to deal with some of that strife. And as you said, you're that person for them.
Right. Right.
So be ready to maybe manage some of those emotions. I think you even started by saying you're gonna need a lot of empathy, like
Yeah.
to know what they're going through and hear them, especially because you are that sounding board for them.
Right.
No,
Because a
that's
lot of people that go into administration, sometimes they forget what it's like to be in the classroom. And
yes,
that's something as a instructional coach you never want to forget, because
totally.
that will help with a lot of bridging to other teachers that might have been harder to get to.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, let me just leave it there. Any other final questions that people have for Terri, whether it be about herself, her role, her journey, her story, whatever it is? And while we're waiting to see if any other chats come in, Terri, I want to take the time to thank you for sharing your story, especially in a field, like I said, I know teachers want to be going into these roles, because it feels like it's a great sidestep from teaching that keeps you in your passion, keeps you doing what you want
Right.
to do, but it strips away a lot of the things that bog down teachers. So I think it
Mhm.
was great to hear from someone. What is it like? How do you get there? Like, how do you get yourself noticed? Because these are few and far between. Not every school is going to have a bunch of positions open for this.
Right.
So it is really interesting in thinking about how, hey, even if you're kind of like on the fence here, like we're going to have to do a little bit more work to get ourselves there. It's not just something that we can kind of like snap our fingers and get overnight. Like it's going to take a
Exactly.
little bit more planning. So I really appreciate that perspective. I
Oh, you're
think
very welcome. I enjoyed
I
it.
need to. It also makes me feel better that I was like, okay, I did make the right choice because I was
Good.
not able to hang on there any longer.
Mm-mm.
Like,
Yep,
uh,
exactly.
so I will echo what Lisa just said in the chat. If you're like, hey, I am someone, whether or not after tonight you're like, ooh, this feels right, or maybe I'm not sure, Lisa is definitely going to be here to give a little bit more information about Teacher Career Transition Academy. And like I said, a lot of our webinars are normally totally outside of being in a school. So I love this like special edition that we got to do. But if you do have any other questions, like I said, drop them. And Terri, thank you so much for
Thanks,
everything.
you guys.
Well, friends, that concludes another inspiring teacher career transition story. Whether you're left feeling certain that this career path is your next calling, or you can cross it off your list, I know you're walking away with valuable insights to take with you. If you want to access even more stories like these, there's an entire library of teacher career transition stories within the Teacher Career Transition Academy under the Career Exploration module of the program. If you're interested in learning more about the Academy, I'll drop a link in the show notes. And don't forget to check out our podcast channel for other great advice from our coaches and experts. Until next time, remember, friends, the journey is just the beginning. Embrace the adventure.